It was not rape. We did 3 rounds at the hotel we lodged, 1 in the evening then 2 in the morning. The hotel room confession. The case began not with a police siren, but with whispers that spread like wildfire. In the dimly lit corridors of a suburban courthouse, reporters scribbled furiously as a young woman, trembling but determined, raised her voice against the man she once called a friend. Her accusation was as chilling as it was familiar. She claimed she had been forced, cornered, and violated inside a hotel room. But then came his voice, firm, unwavering, almost defiant. It was not rape. We did 3 rounds, 1 in the evening and 2 in the morning. The contradiction was stark. On one side, a woman weeping that she had been overpowered. On the other, a man insisting it was passion, not crime. The story quickly spiraled into something far bigger than anyone expected. Love, betrayal, violence, and a child caught in the center of it all. A dangerous triangle. It started, as many tragic stories do, with a toxic love triangle. The woman, let's call her Anita, had been trapped in a violent relationship with her boyfriend. A man who beat her, locked her inside rooms for days and left scars on her body and mind. In desperation, she reached out to Stanley, her boyfriend's childhood friend, hoping he might intervene and reason with him. But Stanley had his own agenda. When she asked him to talk her boyfriend down, Stanley allegedly began feeding her whispers instead, criticizing her partner, undermining him, exposing his cruelty. By evening, the tension between them had shifted. What began as Anita asking for help turned into Stanley offering her an escape. That escape ended in a hotel room. Anita said she resisted. She said she cried, begged, and tried to fight him off. But Stanley insisted it was consensual. He painted a very different picture. Anita not as a victim but as a willing participant. The hotel room. The hotel room itself became the silent witness to this clash of narratives. Anita said she had tried to sleep, only to be woken by his hands forcing themselves on her. She claimed she cried afterward, devastated, swearing she would tell her family. Stanley, however, described something else. He said she teased him, that she told him he was handsome, that women like her weren't interested in men with many lovers. He said they made love, not once but 3 times, once before night fell and twice again when he returned in the morning. He insisted the hotel receptionist even walked in with drinks, proving Anita was never trapped or screaming for help. 2 stories. Same night. Opposite truths. The pregnancy. Weeks later, Anita discovered she was pregnant. For her, it was proof of violation. For Stanley, it was proof of love. And this was where the story began to fracture beyond repair. Anita, terrified and still in love with her abusive boyfriend, wanted the pregnancy terminated. She begged Stanley for money to pay for an abortion. But Stanley refused. He didn't just refuse, he went to the police, alerting them that Anita wanted to kill his child. It was an unusual twist, the alleged perpetrator of a rape dragging his accuser to the police, not to deny the act, but to ensure a baby would be born. The police intervened, forcing Anita to sign a statement that nothing must happen to the child. Her best friend was present as a witness. From that moment, her choice was gone. The pregnancy would continue whether she wanted it or not. A family torn apart. By June 2015, a baby boy was born. Stanley claimed him proudly as his son. Anita, however, drifted between homes, sometimes with Stanley's family, sometimes back with her violent ex. Every move deepened the chaos. Stanley's parents tried to help, feeding her, sheltering her, even buying clothes for the newborn. But resentment grew. Anita and Stanley's mother clashed bitterly. Stanley said Anita was lazy, defiant, and disrespectful. Anita said she was treated like a prisoner, unwanted and humiliated. Their fight spilled into the open. Neighbors watched as Anita screamed in the street. She fought with multiple women in Stanley's neighborhood, her pregnancy and postpartum state making the outbursts even more volatile. Stanley, meanwhile, tried to play the dutiful father, working, feeding the baby, insisting he was the stable one. But Anita never let go of her old boyfriend. Even after the abuse, even after Stanley accused him of leaking her nude photos to his family, she still secretly called him. Every call was a dagger to Stanley's pride, and every day the house became more of a battlefield. The child in the middle. As the boy grew, he became a pawn. Anita accused Stanley of controlling her. Stanley accused Anita of abandoning the child, disappearing for weeks, and leaving him hungry and unattended. By the time the boy was 5, Stanley had kept him almost entirely in his care. Anita, he said, had barely shown up. When she did, she came with other men, dropping off gifts but never staying long. Stanley painted her as a mother who had given up on her son. Then came the shocking twist. The abduction. It was a family celebration, Stanley's younger sister's introduction ceremony. The house was full of music, food, and laughter. Guests danced, neighbors clapped, and in the middle of it all was the boy, running between relatives with childish joy. No one noticed when Anita slipped into the crowd. No one noticed when she held her son's hand. And no one noticed when she walked him out of the house, down the street and into a waiting car. Hours passed before Stanley's parents realized he was gone. By then, Anita was already miles away. 2 months later, Stanley received a call. Anita and the boy were in Delta State, far from Lagos, far from his reach. The baby he had fought so hard to keep was gone. Cliffhanger. For police, this wasn't a custody dispute, it was abduction. For Stanley, it was betrayal. For Anita, it was escape. But here's the haunting truth. Both sides carried evidence, both had witnesses, and both told stories so convincing that outsiders didn't know who to believe. And just when investigators thought they were dealing with a family feud spiraling out of control, they uncovered something that made the entire case even darker. Because someone in this twisted triangle wasn't telling the full truth. And when that truth surfaced, it would tear lives apart. The truth no one wanted to hear. The police report filed after the abduction was simple. Child taken by mother without consent of father. But anyone close to the case knew it wasn't that simple. The boy was now 10 years old. For nearly half his life, his identity had been tugged like a rope in a brutal game between two adults who claimed to love him but despised each other. On one side, Stanley, determined, methodical, insistent he was the only stable parent. On the other, Anita, emotional, volatile, but unwilling to let her child slip completely out of reach. Investigators began digging, but what they found was a storm of contradictions. The conflicting narratives. Anita told detectives she had every right to take her son. She claimed Stanley and his family had treated her like a prisoner, isolating her from her child, turning her into little more than a nanny in her own life. She said she feared her son would grow up brainwashed, taught to despise her. Taking him away, she insisted, was not abduction, it was survival. Stanley, however, delivered his side with cold precision. He described Anita as reckless, violent, and unfit. He said she once tried to abort the very child she now fought over. He produced witnesses who swore she abandoned the boy for weeks, that she spent nights with other men, that she left the child hungry. The truth lay somewhere in between, but neither side was willing to admit it. A twist of evidence. When detectives reviewed Anita's signed police statement from 2014, something unusual appeared. The document clearly showed her agreeing not to terminate the pregnancy. But in the margins there was handwriting, small, scrawled, and angry. It wasn't her signature, but it looked like a note written under pressure. Forensic analysts suggested someone may have forced her hand that day, not just metaphorically but literally. This revelation reframed everything. Was Anita a victim not only of her abusive boyfriend but also of Stanley's manipulation? Did he use the police to trap her into motherhood? For the first time, investigators began questioning whether Stanley's meticulous story hid something darker. The disappearing witness. Then came another blow. The friend who had accompanied Anita the day she was taken to the police station, a woman named Akiri, vanished. Detectives tried to locate her, but neighbors claimed she had left the country years ago, fleeing debt collectors. Others whispered she had been paid off to disappear. Without her, Anita's claims of coercion became harder to prove. And Stanley's version of events remained clean, sharp, and unchallenged. But fate wasn't done with him yet. The boy speaks. In Delta State, school teachers began noticing the boy acting strangely. He was quiet, withdrawn, and often drew disturbing pictures. Men yelling, women crying, police officers with guns. One afternoon, a teacher asked gently about his family. The boy looked down and whispered words that would change everything. Daddy said it wasn't wrong, because Mommy wanted it. The statement raised chills. Teachers alerted child welfare services. The boy was interviewed again, this time by professionals. Slowly, fragments of his young memory surfaced. He spoke of the hotel room. He remembered voices, arguments, and his mother crying. He remembered his father insisting it was love, not violence. For investigators, the case took a brutal turn. The original question wasn't about custody, it was about the origin of the child himself. The dark revelation. Documents showed that back in 2014, Stanley had called Anita's boyfriend, the man accused of beating her, and told him proudly, "Now she is mine." Phone records confirmed late-night calls between Stanley and the boyfriend, discussing Anita like property, mocking her pain. The betrayal was staggering. While Anita clung to one abuser, she had unknowingly fallen into the hands of another. What had been presented as a tragic love triangle now looked like something far worse. A cycle of manipulation, exploitation, and coercion. The final confrontation. Court proceedings began in 2017, dragged on for years, and resurfaced after the abduction in 2023. Each side hurled accusations like weapons. Anita claimed Stanley trapped her with a baby she never wanted. Stanley accused her of being an unfit mother who endangered their son. But then a bombshell. A hotel worker came forward, an elderly receptionist who remembered the night in question. She testified that she had delivered drinks to the room, and yes, Anita had been there. But what she saw was not passion. It was tears. Anita's eyes were red, her voice trembling. She had asked for water, not alcohol. The silence in the courtroom that day was suffocating. The verdict? In the end, the court did not convict Stanley of rape. Too much time had passed, too little hard evidence remained. But the judge's words carried weight. This child was brought into this world under circumstances clouded by coercion and manipulation. Neither parent has proven themselves beyond reproach. But the child must no longer be a pawn. Custody was granted not to Stanley, not to Anita, but to Anita's elderly aunt in Imo State, an outsider, someone untouched by the triangle of betrayal. Both parents were ordered supervised visitation only. It was a rare verdict, one that left both sides broken. Stanley lost the son he fought to claim. Anita lost the boy she once tried to take back. And the child, now old enough to understand fragments of the chaos, grew up with questions no adult could answer cleanly. Haunting ending. 3 months later, police in Lagos received a disturbing report. A young woman had filed a complaint against a man she met through friends. She said he pressured her into lodging at a hotel, claiming it was just for the night. Then, according to her, he forced himself on her, after insisting he knew the law and would never be stupid enough to rape. The man's name was Stanley. History, it seemed, was repeating itself. And somewhere in the shadows of a small town, a 10-year-old boy was growing up, carrying the weight of a story he never asked to inherit.